Hello, it's the 1st of February, and this is episode 183 of the Security Weekly News. Welcome to the week of 30 January. We got UPnP strikes back, Lazarus, Samba, CISA, SMS scams, secret pixels in your email, OMB Zero Trust, and Wordle, along with Jason Wood on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Hello and welcome to the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White. I think most of us have always been suspicious of UPnP. Every time the first time I ever saw UPnP, I was like, I don't know about this. I might not turn it on. I might turn it on. I was definitely suspicious of it, but most of the suspicions have been justified with this story. Convenience is always the bane of security, and UPnP is always about convenience, so that your devices can be identified easily and can get proxy, port forwarding set up and all this kind of stuff very easily. In this particular article, a campaign that has the sort of emo name Eternal Silence, which is either a really good death metal band or maybe a really good Christian rock band. I mean, either one of them kind of sounds like a band name in some different genre. But, this Eternal Silence then is an exploit of UPnP that will compromise your router from the outside and turn it into a proxy server, which is then used to launch attacks against your network and possibly other networks. Akamai found this vulnerability originally, and they said they have been seeing it used in the wild, that there are apparently more than 3.5 million routers found online that use UPnP. 277,000 of those were vulnerable to the attack, and 45,000 of those were already infected. So they went through and did all that, probably Shodan or something like that. Akamai said that the phrase Galleta Silenciosa was found in the rule sets that the attackers were using, which I thought meant the quiet doctor, but apparently it means silent cookie. I was close. That's probably why I keep getting the wrong orders at Mexican restaurants. But regardless, I also for a second thought it meant silent chicken for some reason, but then I was like, no, chicken's not. Whatever. Galena means doctor. Oh, yeah, so silent. But, yeah, I got it all straightened out. Anyway, once the router gets compromised, basically they begin using Eternal Blue and Eternal Red, which is Windows and Linux, machines inside the network, and worming through your network to compromise a whole bunch of stuff. And apparently, there's a lot of unpatched machines that are internal, and they were never patched because, they aren't exposed to the internet. But as Galena Silencio said, "Él está muerto, Jim." This thing is a really good example of a pretty sophisticated attack that isn't really that hard to do. Multiple stages mean they can get through your defenses, compromise machines inside your network that you weren't really worrying about, and then use all that as a platform to attack others. According to the article, you would need to scan the NAT table entries on all endpoints to see if a compromise has actually occurred. But Akamai actually provided in the article a script which you could use to actually do these scans. Apparently, even disabling UPnP won't stop attacks that have already occurred. But if you do disable it and then you reboot the device, that will clear it so that further attacks won't happen. Obviously, there's firmware updates for a lot of these routers, and if you have them, they probably should be applied. There's some other mitigations in the article if you are concerned about this or you want to read more. Lazarus Group, a North Korean APT, added Windows Update to what they call a list of living off the land binaries, or LOL bins. I see what you did there. And they basically use this tool to allow code execution on Windows-based systems. Malwarebytes threat intelligence team found this particular thing going on in January when they were analyzing a spear phishing attack that pretended to be Lockheed Martin. So the attack looked like it originated from Lockheed Martin, but it was a spear phishing email attack. So they send you an email. It's got, the usual stuff. It's got open the attachment. But when you open the attachment on this spear phishing attack, it drops Windows Update conf.link in the startup folder. And another DLL, which is called Wayuang, I don't know how to say it, Wayuang.dll in System 32. The link file basically then launches Windows Update. And when it does that, you can put an embedded command in that string that points it at any DLLs you want to load at the same time. It's just part of the way the command works. And when they do that, it loads that DLL, the one that I can't say. So the new attack is based on like it's an old trick, right, to put arguments onto command line command that allow you to redirect things. This is one of the oldest things I can remember from hacking was the ability to put essentially pointers to other places in the command line instruction as an argument. Bleeping Computer reported back in October 2020 that MD-Sec researcher David Middlehurst found that you could do this on Windows 10 and spotted it being done in the wild. So it's basically just passing that path into the WUA, I don't know how to pronounce that one either. It's the Windows Updater executable, which is called WACIT or WUACLT. I don't know what that stands for, but it's an executable, and when it runs, then it runs this DLL. In MITRE, it's called assigned binary proxy execution, and you can bypass a lot of layer securities with this. Lazarus is also called Hidden Cobra by the NSA. If you're playing the name game with all these different groups that have so many different names, I might start naming them. I think I'm going to call them Dangling Fury. So now they can have 3 different names. So Dangling Fury did this, also known as Lazarus, also known as whatever. Or how about Floppy Wiggler? I kind of like that one. Floppy Wiggler. Yeah, band name called it. Anyway, our old friend Samba, which we know very well, has patched a critical vulnerability found by Orange Sai of DevCore. Samba, is pretty much everywhere, and it has been used since time immemorial to do file sharing, printer sharing, all this kind of stuff via server messaging block. And SMB, which has had its share of problems, has yet another one. This particular one is an out-of-bounds heap read-write in a module called VFS_fruit. I had no idea what that module was, but I looked it up, and the particular module, VFS Fruit, is designed to provide more compatibility with Apple SMB clients and NetAtalk 3 AFP file servers. So this is Apple side stuff. CERT, however, indicates that platforms which were affected by this because they had this stuff installed included Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu, which probably means a whole bunch of others as well. The mitigation for this, of course, is to patch the system because this particular vulnerability will allow remote code execution on the system. And there are some other mitigations in this article as well. So if you're worried about this, you can check that out. Presumably, this has been patched by most of these major systems at this point. CISA added 8 flaws into their catalog of the island of exploited vulnerabilities this week. This includes Apple I/O mobile frame buffer memory corruption vulnerability. Only a government could learn that name, could love that name. The Sonic Wall SMA 100 appliances stack-based buffer overflow vulnerability. There were 2 Bash shell arbitrary code execution vulnerabilities, a Microsoft Windows background intelligent transfer surface improper privilege management vulnerability. Wow. The Army must be naming these. And an Explorer use after free vulnerability. a Grand Stream Networks UCM 6200 SQL injection, and Intel Active Management Technology, Small Business Technology, and Standard Manageability Privilege Escalation vulnerabilities. Oh, wow. I mean, just adding them probably took some time because their names are so long. This list in this that where they're reporting on here, and I included the story because I don't know if you're aware of this list, but the list is not reflective of new attacks. But this is rather a list of exploits that are now being observed being used in the wild. So in some ways, I kind of like that approach because we always see all these cool exploits that are being found, and it's great to learn about them and know they're out there, but they're not actually being used in the wild. So, they're still important, but they're not currently actually being used. But the ones that are being used are likely the ones that are probably going to be used on you. So I think this list may help you prioritize some of this stuff and looking for things. Currently, there are 351 observed exploited vulnerabilities on this list, which is actually called the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, the KEV-C, which sounds like that guy from Long Island that used to come down to the, But anyway, there is a link to that database article or the database of vulnerabilities in that article, so check it out. I don't know about you, but I pretty much need to be tested all the time for COVID-19. If you have certain jobs, like you have to walk into crowded classrooms with lots and lots of infected people and all this kind of stuff, or you work door to door or whatever. But there's a new scam in the United Kingdom in which an SMS text message started alerting recipients that there was available to them a home PCR test. Now, and there's more about that too. If you're already saying, wait, you can't get a home PCR test, but there's already a shortage of home tests. So we already all know this because we've probably, most of you and all of the rest of us have at some point gone out to the local chemist or drugstore or whatever you want to call it and tried to buy a home test and we're told, sorry, there aren't any. So that makes this a pretty good scam. A lot of people, that are in public need to be tested regularly, and they're maybe required to do that. And if you go down to the community center to get tested, the last time we did that, the line was really, really long. In fact, it was longer than the line for those cheap Hamilton tickets was back in the before time when we went to see plays in public. But the general report was that this PCR type of test can't be done this way at all. So it's not a home-based test, but people don't know the difference. And they said, oh, COVID test, I can get this by clicking here, click the link. The good news is the domain Omicron testing is brand new, so strike one. The experts say this test is not available for at-home testing, so strike two. And the website that it takes you to generates an HTTP error 600, which is not an actual error. So when I was reading the article, I was like, what's error 600? And then that's not an actual HTTP error. So I don't know what it's doing, and their guess was that that the site doesn't work correctly, or my guess was maybe it's a test run. They were seeing how many people clicked, and they're just keeping track of them with this website, and they see how many hits they get, and they know they can use that again elsewhere. But, who knows? Or maybe the scam operator didn't really, pay close attention in their web design class. But either way, the reason I brought this up, you may want to reiterate to all your people that some of the things here are very typical of these types of scams. But once again, they found that really nasty little lever they can use to try to get you to click that link because you go, oh, wow, a home test. I can get one. I don't have to go stand in line. And, we're all looking for those rapid tests, so I can really see how somebody might go for this. Proton Mail just announced a feature that they are blocking that a lot of people don't know about. And I actually had sort of heard about this before, but I hadn't really paid much attention to it before. And it's trackers that get into your inbox. According to Bill Fitzgerald at Funny Monkey, code chunks of various types can be embedded in emails that actually report back on whether you looked at it, because a lot of email inboxes are just web pages. They can report the location, the time of day, and so forth, unless the email provider has put in place end-to-end encryption. But according to this article, one of the things they mentioned was that Gmail, which they used to read all your mail, if you didn't know that, and they used that reader to target you with ads, and they stopped that back in 2017, but they would not confirm, and they were approached by the writer of the article, about this tactic and ask if this tactic still works on Gmail if you receive mail from other parties. And they said they had no comment on that. So, and they don't provide end-to-end encryption. So Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, they don't have end-to-end encryption, which means theoretically this would work if third parties are sending you emails. And if they're not, your email account's probably disabled or something, because I get so many every day. Now, the way this works, in particular, is they put in these emails something called tracking pixels. And basically what they do is they take a couple of pixels, maybe more, and they essentially make them translucent, so they're really, really hard to see, because if you make them clear and you put them on top of something else, you won't even notice that they're there. They can be in an image or what have you. But those particular pixels, and they can have different colors, right, because pixels have a lot of different colors possible, and they set the color and the pattern of the pixels so that they actually can create a unique pixel pattern for each email that's sent out in an email campaign. And of course, I guess the legitimate idea behind this was for companies that sell email campaign services like Twilio and some of these kind of companies. They are able to track how many people opened the emails and all this kind of information by these pixels. So when you open it, the pixel is going to load from the server when the images load. And so basically, they got your IP. They can see who opened it and when they opened it. They can probably tell what type of device you have, what browser was being used, the time, etc. All sorts of good intel. Of course, that data is collected and then sold to others and used to promote their services, saying, hey, look how many people we get to open the mail. What do you do about this? Well, the main recommendation here was that you should block all images. And most of the services seem to have this as an option. I know Gmail does, and I think Outlook has that turned on by default, and Gmail may have it turned on by default now as well. I can't remember if I turned that on or not. But you could obviously the ad said you could of course switch to Proton Mail or other services that use end-to-end encryption. It's a very interesting article if you like this kind of the very, very unique kind of thing and a cool approach from somebody. On the 26th of January, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, or the dreaded OMB as it's known, published its new Zero Trust strategy. This basically is going to require Zero Trust architecture to be implemented at all U.S. federal agencies by the end of 2024. That sounds like a long time to me, but of course, the article goes on to say how all the agencies said, "Oh no, we'll never be able to, comply with this in that amount of time. It'll take all these years." The article, though, is about the readiness of those agencies to implement this strategy at all. A survey in the article said that the tech and security leaders from the agencies were hopeful about the implementation of Zero Trust standards. Like, yeah, they're all going to say no, it'll never work, but that the timeline was probably too fast. The standards are going to include, among other things, MFA requirements, reliable asset inventories. Wow, just those two things alone would be awesome. Encrypted DNS, HTTPS, public vulnerability disclosure, and many more items. There was a whole long list of them. I'm not going to read them all to you. You can read the article. But considering where some of these agencies started and the fact that OMB lost all my top secret data files, yeah, I got that letter too, just like a lot of you did. Well, I'll believe it when I see it, but at least they're trying to do something at this point. All right. His book, The Imaginary Camel, describes a descent into sex, drugs, madness, and a crippling obsession with Austin Powers movies. Reputedly based on his real-world adventures with William Burroughs and a guy named Red from Augusta, Georgia, the book won international acclaim and has been described as reading Ulysses on psilocybin. Please welcome Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back with you. Doug is obviously taking some of the products when he writes these introductions. So last year, everybody was talking about the U.S. getting hit by a colonial pipeline being attacked and, ransomed up and oil being shut off. This week, it appears that it is Germany's turn to try that right out. Several news articles have basically reported on this, and all of them really kind of say the same thing. So I kind of kept digging at this to see what I could find, because, it's just kind of interesting when you see something like critical infrastructure like this get taken offline, which is basically what's going on. A cyber attacker, according to the Register and other articles, has impacted two companies that operate terminals to offload tanker ships and then load them for inland transportation and distribution. And the two companies, basically, the impact is they've shut down. They're no longer able to operate at really any normal kind of capacity. The two companies themselves are, probably going to butcher some of these names. The first one's just kind of funny. Oil Tanking is the way it's spelled, GmbH, and the other one is Babanaft, GmbH. Both companies have invoked what is called force majeure, basically saying, let us out of all of our contractual obligations because, and this is a quote, an extraordinary event has occurred or occurs, which is beyond the entity's control, who is invoking force majeure. Probably going to be some debate on whether or not that was out of their control or not. I'm sure this is going to get looked at by German regulators and see what went wrong and what should have been differently. Fortunately for Germany, this doesn't appear to be as impactful as what happened to Colonial Pipeline, where it shut off oil flow to the eastern United States. This is just two facilities out of several that are operating inside of Germany, and some of the folks, Shell Oil, for example, has already said they're rerouting stuff to get their ships over to other ports. Now, at the same point, there's still going to be some impact because, as we've seen here, you line up a bunch of tankers outside of a port facility. We end up with lines and stuff like that. It takes a while to get through. So, they have a place to offload, but it's going to take some more time. The attack itself occurred on Saturday. So this is really pretty new. We're on day 4, really, of this intrusion. And I'll give you just a quick summary of what's been released officially, then I'll move into some of the more speculative pieces and my thoughts on that. Basically, 2 facilities have been forced to operate at greatly reduced capacity. And this is going to fail to keep their commitments, hence the force majeure invocation. Oil Tankings, which I'm sure is pronounced differently over there, but whatever, says they're working to solve the issue according to our contingency plans, as well as to understand the full scope of the incident, which is lawyer speak for, we're trying to figure out what's happening, and we have some stuff that we dusted off and are trying out. No public statements. Nobody's responding to requests for comments or anything like that. Beyond that, nobody's saying what the intrusion is, what caused this, which is like the first question everybody's asked us. Well, what happened? And nobody is saying. Again, Shell has said that they are moving at least their supplies or their ships to another facility to get offloaded. And that's about it. Now, one thing I did find in the Register article that I have linked in the show notes was a comment that kind of explained, what does this mean operating at reduced capacity? Does this mean some systems are online? Maybe we had some down for maintenance, and when we brought them back up, they can still function, and that allows us to operate. The Register turned around and cited an article on Der Spiegel, which said that the loading and unloading systems at these depots is almost entirely automated. And they can do some operations manually, but that is the limited extent that we're talking about of their capabilities. So at this point, we've got a bunch of folks running around on oil ships, tankers hooking up hoses, turning on pumps, and trying to move things around basically by brute force, rather than the automated systems that allow them to run at a much greater capacity. So there's your impact there. On the speculative side of things, this is where I found it to be much more interesting. One, I found some Twitter posts claiming from people claiming to know people who are responding to the intrusion, and they're saying that, yep, this is a ransomware attack, and that's what's going on. Now, if that's the case, that wouldn't be a particular surprise to anybody. I mean, it was the first thing that crossed my mind. One of the more interesting speculations, and by interesting, I mean it's so disconnected from what's going on here that you're like, why did you even include this, was from an article on ZDNet, where they basically made the connection and said, hey, last week, the German government, the intel services, released a warning to companies in Germany saying, hey, APT27 is using a piece of malware called HyperBro against German companies. And That goes on to talk about attacks against Exchange servers and Zoho AD Self-Service Plus that had been occurring since March 21st. Now, you're like, okay, well, I mean, we've also received these bulletins. If you're in the U.S. and you'll see bulletins from some of these organizations telling you, hey, by the way, the bad guys are using this particular vulnerability to do stuff. And everybody's like, yeah, no kidding. We've been dealing with this for 6 months or so. And honestly, that's what this sounds like. It's just, we've got just kind of a report that came out that said, oh, by the way, we've seen this. And I can say that, through 2021, I saw lots of activity around Exchange and Zoho AD Self-Service Plus. So what that has to do with this intrusion, I have no idea, but it appears ZDNet is attempting to make the connection in this particular article between this warning and the attack in this article. Maybe, but I'm not buying it. One of the things I was a little surprised at, given all of the feed into the news cycle and stuff like that, maybe because it wasn't as serious as it, like, widespread attack, was that nobody's commenting on, oh my goodness, the Russians are about to invade the Ukraine. Maybe, just maybe, this attack is related to that, and that's what's behind this. But nobody's saying anything about it, and that would be way out there as far as speculative again, because what does this have to do with it? But I was surprised nobody made that comment. Now, I mean, I understand why people want to find out who did this. Why did they do this? What's going on behind the scenes? What is the nature of this attack? I mean, that's certainly something we're going to be interested in, is what happened here, and is it something we would have to deal with, or we can improve on in our organizations, or what have you. So I get all of that, but at this point, this intrusion is 4 days old. So we're not going to have a lot of information, particularly since the companies themselves are being very quiet about what's going on. So it's going to take some time. I'm sure things will leak out eventually. Maybe we'll get an official statement describing what it is. Probably they'll have to file it in some kind of government report saying, oh, this was the nature of it, and here's what we did, and here was the impact, and stuff like that. If it is ransomware, if that's what it does end up turning out to be, well, yeah, I mean, this is just kind of another reminder, regardless, that attackers go after where it hurts. Disrupting a logistics company, the operations of a logistics company, is going to leave a mark on them and put the pressure on them. So again, if it does turn out to be ransomware, then that's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to want to pay out to get their systems back online as soon as they can. But maybe it's in something entirely else. We'll have to see what that turns out to be. Obviously, I guess this is just kind of, to me, I just took this as a little bit of a cautionary tale against getting my exercise by jumping to conclusions all over the place as to what's gone on. If you'd like to read more, I've included the links to the Register article, the ZDNet article, as well as a link to some of the rumors being posted on Twitter. You can go ahead and take a look and see what you think. It'll be kind of interesting, I think, to see what the end result of this is, and when they finally start telling us what went on behind the scenes. So go take a look.
All right. Thanks, Jason. And finally, if you haven't seen Wordle, it's a clever little letter guessing game that's, to me, 2 parts luck and 1 part skill. Josh Wardle wrote the code for fun and cranked out the 1,900 lines of JavaScript so that his partner could play a new kind of word game. It's like a simple version of the old game Mastermind. If you've ever seen that, it's a really old game that we used to play when we were kids. But anyway, the New York Times bought it. So I was just going to let you know, because all these people play it. The New York Times bought it. The thing went from apparently a couple of people fooling around with it back like last November to now millions of people a day are playing this free word game. I was just looking at the words on the screen up there. Aptly large pluck. I wonder what that might mean. But anyway, the amount that they sold it for, or they bought it for, was not revealed. Was said to be in the low 7 figures, which is a pretty good deal for 1,900 lines of JavaScript. So the New York Times does charge $20 a year for access to all of its infamous crossword puzzles that we all used to work in when we sat in the hallway smoking cigarettes waiting for our next class. but presumably Wordle will probably be behind the paywall. Maybe not. I don't know. But the code's so simple, I'm sure there will be plenty of illegal copies running around in no time, or you could just code up one yourself. And that's the news. Thanks, Jason. I'll see you Friday on the wrap-up show.